Dear students, we shall study drugs of abuse in this paper, and the focus will be, we will have some introduction on drugs, what is meant by drug abuse. We will tell you what are the various terminologies which are related to the drug abuse, because as forensic scientists you must be aware of all these. Then specially the focus of one module will be on psychoactive drugs. We will deal with in detail the drugs like opium, its derivatives, morphine, heroin and codeine. What are depressants? We will study some common depressants, especially the barbiturates and the alcohols and benzodiazepines. Then stimulants, various types of stimulants, and especially we will deal with amphetamines and methamphetamines, and the common stimulants like caffeine, nicotine and cocaine we will study in detail. We shall also study about the hallucinogens and take the cases of cannabis, LSD and psilocybin. We shall also try to understand what are the natural drugs and then what are the designer drugs, and also the addiction psychology related with this. Collection and preservation of evidences, how it should be done if you find these drugs at the crime scene, and then how the analysis of the various types of drugs, especially how the acidic drugs are analyzed and how the basic drugs are analyzed, and then the instrumental methods of analysis of drugs will be dealt up with. We will also focus on pharmacodynamics and the drug signaling pathway and how the drug overdose has the effects, abuse of OTC drugs, the legal provisions which are regarding there in drug abuse, the use of steroids in the modern day sports. We shall also focus on how drugs and crimes are related and the role of forensic scientists in the drug analysis and the various routes of administration, the dose response and importance of dose, the study of alkaloids and the disorders which are caused by drug overdose and the adverse effects of drugs. At the end we shall also study some case studies of the drugs of abuse. So this entire paper will prepare you about how as forensic scientists you should deal with the persons who are drugged, or if you find some drugs at the crime scene, and then what are the legal proceedings around that, so that you are more aware. So let us begin with the very first module, and in the first module we shall go into the introduction of the drugs. We will try to understand what are the various classification of drugs, that is therapeutic and psychoactive, the various risks associated with drugs in brief, we will understand these in details later, and the overview of forensic analysis of drugs, that is there are color or spot tests, then there are microcrystal tests and how you carry out the confirmatory tests. So with this background, let us begin with knowing what is a drug. According to WHO, a drug is any substance that is used or proposed to be used to modify or explore the physiological structures or the pathological states for the benefit of the recipient. For example, paracetamol, ciprofloxacin and so on there. Or it can be said that a drug is a stuff which may have medicinal, intoxicating, performance augmenting or other effects when taken or inserted into a human or animal body, and which is not considered a food or a food supplement. Drugs are defined differently by various drug control laws, government regulations, as medicines or on the basis of their usage. The definition of drug in pharmacology can be stated as a chemical substance used in the treatment, cure, prevention or diagnosis of disease or otherwise used to enhance the physical or mental well-being. For the chronic disorders, Drugs can be described for a limited duration or on a regular basis. Drugs of hallucinogens and opioids like opiums, they are examples of recreational drugs, which are the chemical substance that affect the central nervous system, abbreviated as CNS. And these type of drugs are abused for distinguished beneficial effect on consciousness, perception, behavior and personality. Addiction and habituation is the beginning of drugs abuse. Drugs which are taken from outside by the organism can be usually distinguished from the endogenous biochemical. For example, when hormone insulin is synthesized in the body, it is called a hormone because it is being synthesized by the pancreas inside our body. But it will be called as a drug when it is introduced into our body from outside through injection, say. So, with this background, let us try to understand more about the drugs with the help of these graphics and visuals.
On the basis of the purpose of their use, different drugs can be classified into two types. Firstly, therapeutic drugs, and secondly, psychoactive drugs. Although both of these categories often overlap, but due to their specific usage and wide range, psychoactive drugs are treated as distinct class. Let us discuss about therapeutic drugs. A therapeutic drug is a substance that has healing or preventive properties in relation to certain diseases or is administered to enable medical diagnosis. The drugs in common therapeutic use may be classified chiefly into four categories. Firstly, analgesics and antipyretics. An analgesic is a type of drug that relieves pain. On the other part, an antipyretic is a type of drug that is used to reduce the temperature of the body. Aspirin and paracetamol are the commonly used drugs in this category. Aspirin, chemically called acetyl salicylic acid, is a white crystalline powder having an acidic taste and is used commonly for relieving from pains or aches, etc. Even small doses of this drug may prove to be fatal due to idiosyncrasy. However, minimum fatal dose is about 5 to 10 grams. Paracetamol, chemically called acetaminophen, is metabolite of phenacetin and is widely in use these days in place of aspirin. The second category is antihistamines. These are the drugs which are known to antagonize the action of histamine. These are commonly used in allergic disorders and other conditions like common cold. The common preparations include promethazine hydrochloride, which is also called as Phenargan, diphenylhydramine, also called as Benadryl, chlorcyclazine, which is Hystantin, andazolene, also called as antistein, etc. Its fatal dose is about 1 gram. The third category is that of antidepressants. Antidepressants are the drugs which are generally used in psychiatric disorders to treat the depression. These drugs have an initial sedative effect which is followed by an antidepressant effect within a week or more. Commonly used antidepressant drugs are imipramine, amitriptyline, etc. The fourth category is that of tranquilizers. The tranquilizers are the drugs that produce a general tranquility without impairment of high thinking faculties or the inducement of sleep. To reduce tension and anxiety of mental patients, tranquilizers like reserpine and chlorpromazine are used. Coming on to psychoactive drugs. A psychoactive drug or a psychopharmaceutical or a psychotropic drug is a chemical substance that acts principally upon the central nervous system, where it affects the brain functioning, resulting in the modifications in perception, mood, consciousness, cognition and behavior. These substances may be used recreationally or to purposefully change one's consciousness or for ritual, spiritual purposes. For example, anesthetics, analgesics or the drugs used for the treatment of psychiatric disorders. These types of psychoactive drugs have also therapeutic activities. Psychoactive drugs bring about marked changes in the consciousness and mood that the user may find pleasant, and such drugs are thus reinforcing. Despite health risks and neglecting consequences, many psychoactive substances are misused or abused, that is, used excessively with continuous use of some substances, psychological and physical dependence, that is, addiction may develop. Worldwide, many governments of many nations have posed restrictions on drug production and sales in an attempt to control drug abuse and physical dependency on drugs. Let us classify psychoactive substances. Psychoactive substances are used by human beings for varied reasons. The world's largest consumption of psychoactive substance is in the form of caffeine, but unlike other drugs, it is unregulated and is legal in almost all the countries. According to pharmacological effects in the body, psychoactive drugs are divided into different categories. Generally used psychoactive drugs are narcotics, stimulants, hallucinogens, depressants and anabolic steroids. Let us discuss them one by one. Firstly, narcotics. The term narcotics is originated from the Greek word narkotikos, which means a state of lethargy. This group comprises of substances that act on the CNS and bring relief from discomfort and produces sleep. The origin of most narcotics is opium, which is a sticky milky juice obtained from the unripe pod of poppy. The scientific name of this plant is Papaver somniferum. Some of the examples of narcotic substances are opium, morphine, heroin, codeine, synthetic opiates, etc. Morphine is obtained from raw opium. It is normally administered by injection by hypodermic needles. It results in euphoric state with sleepy and relaxed appearance of the user. It is generally 3 to 5 times stronger than opium. Heroin, which is chemically known as diacetyl morphine, is a white crystalline powder which is derived by adding 2 acetyl groups to the morphine. Heroin in impure form is known as brown sugar. It is 10 to 15 times more effective than morphine. It may be either injected or sniffed to cause similar effects as that of opium and heroin, but with lighter magnitude. Codeine is also a byproduct of morphine but is less effective. It acts as a base in many pain relievers and cough remedies. Let us see the signs and symptoms of narcotics abuse. Firstly, there is respiratory depression, which is symptomized by shallow breathing. The user suffers from small pupils, bloodshot eyes, nausea, vomiting, itching skin, flushed skin, constipation, poor judgment power and confusion. Coming on to stimulants. Stimulants are those substances that stimulates the mind, wakes one up and produces euphoria, that is a feeling of well-being, but do not affect one's perception. Examples of stimulants are amphetamines, methamphetamines, caffeine, nicotine, cocaine, etc. Amphetamines may be injected directly into the bloodstream through intravenous injection. The desire for a more intense experience is the chief motive behind intravenous route of administration. Firstly, a sensation of flash or rush is experienced by the user, which is followed by a high feeling of pleasure and euphoria that produces hyperactivity with a feeling of clarity of vision as well as hallucinations. After that effect wears off, the individual passes through a period of exhaustion and may even sleep continuously for 1 or 2 days. Another type of amphetamine is methamphetamine, called speed, because of its rapid stimulation of central nervous system. Then cocaine is also a potent stimulant that produces similar effects as that of amphetamines. These effects are increased alertness accompanied by suppression of hunger and fatigue. It is generally sniffed and is absorbed into the body through the mucous membrane of the nose. One other form of cocaine which is quite popular is crack. It is manufactured by heating a mixture of cocaine, baking soda and water. It is also snorted and produces similar effects like that of cocaine. Now let us study about hallucinogens. Hallucinogens are also called psychedelics, dissociatives and deliriants. This category comprises of all those substances that produce distinct alterations in normal thought processes, perceptions and mood. There are a number of substances with varying chemical composition that have hallucinogenic properties. Examples of hallucinogens includes LSD, which is lysergic acid diethylamide, PCP, which is phencyclidine, DMT, also called dimethyltryptamine, mescaline, psilocybin, etc. LSD, lysergic acid diethylamide, is synthesized from lysergic acid, which is a substance derived from ergot, which is a type of fungus. It attacks a certain type of grains. This is a very potent drug. Only 25 mg is sufficient to start visual hallucinations in the mind that may last for about 12 hours. This drug produces noticeable changes in mood, leading to laughing and crying at the slightest provocation. Feeling of anxiety and tension always is accompanied by the use of LSD. On the other hand, PCP is synthesized by quite a simple chemical process, thus is much more easily available. PCP is frequently mixed with other drugs like amphetamine or LSD and is sold as a powder called angel dust. It can also be found in form of capsules or tablets or as liquids. The drug is smoked, ingested or sniffed. Marijuana is an example of a psychoactive drug that combines properties of each of these groups. Cannabis plant is used to manufacture drugs like charas, bhang, ganja and hashish. Let us study about depressants. Depressants, also called downers, includes sedatives and hypnotics. This category consists of all of the sleep inducing, calmative, anxiety reducing, anesthetizing substances which induces perpetual changes like dream sequences and also often bring to the mind the feelings of euphoria. Examples are alcoholic beverages like ethanol, barbiturates, benzodiazepines, etc. Like alcohol, barbiturates acts on the central nervous system to suppress its vital functions, causing relaxation and creates a feeling of well-being and produces sleep. Barbiturates are usually administered by mouth. The average sedative dose is about 10 to 70 milligrams. There are about 25 varieties of barbiturate derivatives. Some barbiturates are absorbed more slowly than others and are generally termed as long-active barbiturates like phenobarbital. On the other hand, some barbiturates are absorbed rather quickly and are termed as short-acting barbiturates like phenobarbital, sec-barbital, etc. Apparently, abusers prefer the faster acting ones. Let us discuss the risks associated with drugs. Drugs can never be 100% safe. Different drugs have different dangers associated with them. Drugs like alcohol, heroin and tranquilizers have a sedative effect that slows down the process of the body and brain functions. Over a period of their usage, using sedatives may also lead to physical dependency and withdrawal symptoms. While on the other hand, drugs like cannabis are not known to cause physical dependence. If stimulants are abused in huge quantities, it can bring anxiety or panic attacks. People who have heart problems and blood pressure problems, stimulants are particularly dangerous for them. Similarly, hallucinogens sometimes produce very disturbing experiences and leads to erratic or dangerous behavior by the abuser, especially if they are already unstable. Let us discuss the forensic analysis of drugs. In order to meet the legal requirements, the forensic analysis of such drugs proceeds from screening tests to more specific confirmatory tests. Suppose a white powdered sugar is obtained from the crime scene. The primary task would be to confirm the identity of the substance. Most confirmatory analyses employed for drug identification are moderately time consuming and require the use of many sophisticated and expensive instrumentation such as a gas chromatograph mass spectrometer, that is GCMS, or a Fourier transform infrared spectrophotometer, that is FTIR, to save money and time before conducting a confirmatory analysis by instrumentation techniques like GC. quick and inexpensive presumptive drug analysis should be done. These analyses not only directs the forensic scientist towards an appropriate confirmatory analysis that will yield the desired results, but also saves time. Let us discuss the screening and confirmatory tests which are normally performed. Different drugs yield characteristic colors when they are allowed to react with certain specific chemical reagents. These tests not only indicates the presence of certain drugs but are also for screening purposes to give the investigator a proper direction in which he can proceed his investigation. Color tests, sometimes called spot tests, are presumptive drug tests used to probe questioned drug samples for their chemical properties. If chemical properties consistent with a known drug are discovered, a questioned drug sample can be presumptively identified. When conducting a color test, chemicals known to produce a colored product in the presence of a suspected drug are added to a small amount of the questioned sample. If the questioned sample contains the suspected drug, a color product having the color representative of the suspected drug will be produced. For example, cocaine produces a blue product when allowed to react with the chemical cobalt thiocyanate, and LSD produces a red-violet product when allowed to react with p-dimethylaminobenzylaldehyde. Many substances other than drugs will react with the chemicals used for presumptive drug identification and produce products of varying colors or no color at all. The differing color or no color suggests that the questioned sample does not contain the suspected drug. Yet, many other substances will produce a product with the same representative color as the suspected drug. For example, in the presence of cobalt thiocyanate, benzocaine and procaine all yield a blue colored product similar to that of cocaine. For this reason, a positive color test is not confirmatory and simply directs the forensic scientists towards the identification by limiting the possible number of drugs. For example, if a blue product is formed by cobalt thiocyanate, methamphetamine, then heroin and LSD can be excluded as possible identities of the unknown substance. Color test reactions are generally performed in crime laboratories using spot plates. Spot plates are small ceramic or plastic dishes that contain several wells. Because most drug color tests are quite sensitive and requiring few micrograms of the sample being tested, the small wells of the spot plate are ideal for analysis. In addition, neighboring wells can be used to conduct positive or drug standard and negative, that is no drug, and controls. Side-by-side comparison of colors generated from the questioned sample and the controlled samples assist in positive identification. Typically, different chemicals are used for each drug to be tested. Some chemicals, however, are used for more than one class of drugs. For example, the Marquis test consisting of two chemicals, that is sulfuric acid and formaldehyde, yields a purple product for opiates like morphine, heroin, codeine and oxycodone, and an orange-red product for amphetamine and methamphetamine. the reagent Van Eyck is prepared from p-dimethyl aminobenzaldehyde in 10% concentrated HCl and ethanol, gives purple coloration in the presence of LSD. Marquis reagent, as we have already studied, gives brown orange color to show the presence of amphetamine, while it gives purple color with opium. Suman reagent gives deep blue coloration in the presence of amphetamine, while Dilly-Copenhague reagent is used to test the presence of barbiturates. It gives violet color indicating the presence of barbiturates. Moving on to microcrystal test. Microcrystal tests are more specific than color tests. In these tests, different reagents are made to react with a drug that produces a crystalline precipitate. It is the size and shape of the crystal under microscope examination which are highly characteristic of drugs. However, these tests are also not confirmatory, so the presence of a certain drug needs to be further confirmed by various sophisticated instruments. Now, let us have a look at tests used for different drugs. The presence of heroin is tested by using the reagent platinum chloride. Roseate color crystal appearance indicates the presence of heroin, while nicotine gives roseate colored crystals of needles in the presence of sodium chloride. Presence of papaverine is indicated by the appearance of yellow crystals after reacting with platinum chloride. Thebaine gives dense rosettes. Coming on to the confirmatory tests. There are a number of tests which can detect the presence of drugs even when they are present in a very minute quantity. For the quantitative and qualitative analysis of drugs, various chromatographic techniques are used which are excellent methods. Thin layer chromatography, gas chromatography and high performance liquid chromatography etc. are some of the instrumentation techniques which are used for confirmatory tests. Confirmatory tests requires high selectivity and sensitivity towards drugs as well as their metabolites and is frequently carried out by GCMS. Gas chromatography technique is grounded on the parting of unstable or volatile samples by their exceptional affinity for the column. Target drug compounds in the sample are recognized by their holding time when samples are made to run through chromatographic columns. Gas chromatography combined with mass spectrometry is a robust method because structures of anonymous compounds can be recognized after they have been separated using GC method. HPLC, FTIR and UV visible other analytical instruments used in forensic laboratories as corresponding techniques.
So dear students, let us now summarize what we have learnt in this module. We have understood that a drug is a substance which may have medicinal, intoxicating, performance augmenting or other effects when taken or put into a human body or body of another animal and is not considered as a food or food supplement. We studied that different drugs can be categorized into therapeutic drugs and psychoactive drugs. A psychoactive drug, a psychopharmaceutical or psychotropic drug is a chemical substance that acts primarily upon the central nervous system where it affects our brain function, resulting into alterations in perception, mood, consciousness, cognition and our behavior. The therapeutic drugs may be categorized chiefly into 4 categories, that is analgesics, antipyretics, antihistamines, antidepressant and tranquilizers. Psychoactive drugs are categorized into different groups like narcotics, stimulants, depressants and hallucinogens. We also studied that drug use can never be 100% safe even if we are using it as a medicine. Different drugs have different dangers associated with them. The forensic analysis of such drugs proceeds from the screening test to more specific confirmatory test. The screening tests include color or spot test, microcrystal test, and these are further confirmed by different sophisticated instruments that we will be trying to understand in subsequent modules in more detail.